We're off.
Hello, I'm here with Coptic ME, and they produce a range of textiles and other items for the discerning historical reenactor. Their concentration is the late Roman period, going from the 3rd century up to about the 6th century AD, but they have done later examples as well. We're going to be covering that in a minute. And we're going to start off really with this chap here. This is Ian from Coptic ME, and he's wearing I believe it's a late 3rd century tunic, is that correct? Pillbox hat and late 3rd century tunic. So do you want to talk us through it, mate?
Yeah, so some of the designs, the geometric designs, tend to run through from the early period through the middle and into the late. It's very, very difficult to define a geometric design from any particular period without actually looking at the textile itself and the actual fabric that's been used and the weave. But this example came from a piece of material, an extant piece of material from Egypt, and Mandy's digitised it and turned it into a design for a slightly earlier period tunic. As I say, the belt, the Aldenburg belt, typical of the late 3rd century, the wider belts. Belts tended towards the sort of 5th century to start getting a lot thinner and to become a little bit less gaudy.
Can I ask you to pirouette and to show the decoration on the back?
Yeah, give us a 12.
Look at the
That's
symmetry
fantastic.
on the tunic.
That is brilliant stuff. Now, I think the great stuff about
Thanks,
the great thing about the research you put into it is you actually you've actually managed to purchase some original fragments, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
So do you want to talk us through those? Because this is extraordinary. That is beautiful. That's an original
I'm coming in.
Coptic fragment, and that's just amazing. The colours that are there. What exact time period is that one? Because I understand the earlier tunics are kind of tend to be like one colour, don't they? They tend to be indigo or one other colour. But
yeah.
When you get to later, is that correct? The later ones are different colours. Is that?
There's a school of thought that suggests in the early period, so before the middle of the 5th century, that a lot of the monochrome colour were male tunics, and female dalmaticas and things like that were often using 2 or 3 different colours. But it's interesting to note that a couple of these samples that we've obtained, the actual fine weave of the linen would suggest that they're actually quite early.
Oh, really? Okay, I hadn't realised that.
So whether or not this particular piece actually came from a tunic or not, it's almost impossible to tell.
Of course, because it's just a fragment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And we have thousands and thousands of fragments. We do have situations though where you can definitely see the context of what it existed in originally. Again, this is an incredibly finely woven
It is,
linen.
isn't it? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And the actual design on there lends itself to the early period again.
It's quite interesting because you see some animals here, like I think they're deer or something like that, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they are. But there are times where some of the animals are so abstract; it's hard to tell what they're actually meant to represent.
Absolutely. I think, with the weavers themselves, a range of skill levels existed within the different weaving houses and the different shops. So there are a couple of very, very famous Coptic fragments textiles that show an incredible amount of colour variation, very, very subtle colour changes, which must have taken a huge amount of skill to weave. But then we've also got other ones which are just block bold colour.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed by this. This is now. Have I got this right? Is this a sleeve? Is this an entire sleeve that you actually own?
Yeah. So sometimes it's possible to obtain a fragment and you can actually see exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So we've got the finished edge here of the cuff.
Yeah.
Along the bottom, and the stitch marks were still visible with the threads in the end, where this side was fixed to this side.
Yeah.
So this is definitely the manic, I believe they call it, the end of the end of the sleeve cuff.
I absolutely love this little wave pattern here that often you employ on your tunics. It's wonderful.
It's quite frequently seen in patterns, and it does make me wonder whether or not it's actually quite an easier one of the techniques to adopt.
Oh, okay.
Because it's seen so frequently.
Yeah.
Either that, or it probably has a specific imagery, maybe representing flowing water or something like that.
Fantastic. Is it possible to talk us through some of your wares here? Because I see you've got lots of examples ranging from the early part of this period up to the 7th or 8th century. I think you've got some examples from that.
Yeah. So in a lot of the early period fragments, the extant fragments that exist, we tend to see influences from earlier Greek and Hellenistic imagery.
Sure.
Okay. As time moves on, more and more what we would call Christian images get involved in it as well. But the earlier period is often around about the harvest theme. So you often see lots of baskets of fruit. You see flowers.
All about plenty and prosperity, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
Yeah. So those are images that were started. As we get towards the later period, when you sort of reach the middle of the 7th century, most of the Christian imagery starts to disappear, and the extant Coptic textiles that are found then are more Muslim imagery.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
And Arabic as well. It sort of starts to come into it. And there is actually a difference as well in the twist of the threads as well. There was a lot of thread coming in from Eastern countries, and the twist is different. So under a microscope, you can actually analyse the base linen that's been used. But as I say, geometric patterns existed right the way through. They were always very, very popular. But as I say, there's lots of imagery it's associated with things like rabbits.
And this is a pair of trousers, yeah?
Yeah. So this pair of trousers made on the Thorsberg pattern.
Oh right. Yeah.
But this is just a roundel that's been added to the shin area. Again, it's seen occasionally in iconography.
It's actually worth saying the Thorsberg pattern is often used by reenactors because there aren't many examples of trousers that survive.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean obviously I've heard lots of arguments about how people in the late Roman period just wear leg wraps around tunics and not actually wear trousers. Obviously in places like Italy and Spain, but obviously if you're in a colder climate, then you're going to need to employ something that is going to keep you a bit warmer.
No, absolutely. And as I say, as you say, there's very, very limited evidence. But then the tunics themselves, although there are whole tunics that have been found, there are thousands and thousands of pieces of extant image, weaving work that we don't know whether they were. It was such a popular thing to do at the time that the weaving houses were creating tablecloths, they were creating curtains, they were creating wall hangings, and all of these. Mostly they survived because they were used to wrap up the bodies of the dead when they were buried. So sometimes people were literally buried
in their best clothing.
Their best clothing. Sometimes people were wrapped up in a pair of curtains. That's what's actually happened. So some of these materials and samples that we've found, we don't know exactly whether they were tunics or not. But one of the things that Mandy does at Coptic ME is to take the designs that people have seen and like, and using the existing ones as a template, as a guide, we try to recreate what a tunic might have looked like using that particular pattern. But as we move further on into the time periods, there are some examples of much later designs.
And this is from which period? This panel this is a much later one because I
absolutely
yeah.
So I believe this is this 6th going into 7th century? 7th,
But it's a bit classified because the customer is waiting for it, and it's taken ages.
But it's beautiful though.
It's a huge pair of clavy that go over the shoulder on a full-length tunic, but the
I-
customer's waiting for it. It's taken ages to do.
I have to say the detail is just extraordinary, and the
That's
colours.
just a wee snip of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
once,
that was a
once the
sample.
once the garment's finished, we'll post that on the
Yeah.
on
Yes,
the
you'll
Coptic
get-
ME
yeah,
Facebook
'cause that's
page,
just
so
to
that
show
people
the-
can see what it looks like.
But it's also worth saying, I'm ever so sorry to say this, but I can see here you've worked on a much earlier tunic pattern. Now this is a
Greek.
Greek pattern, yeah, and this is a palmette pattern.
Yes, yeah.
Which now this was used by the Greeks and the Etruscans. You can see it sort of repeated. Now this tunic here is basically it's two pieces that are kind of broached together. In this case, sort of sewn to give it an extra bit of strength. But basically they're broached together, and you've got the shoulder area and the hem. But I think that's wonderful. That's really it's like. But that was about what's that, about 500 BC, something like that.
Yeah, probably. It's just an alternative. A lot of people immediately associate the Greek key
Yeah.
with the classic
So,
Greek
yeah,
style.
Yeah, you see that again and again, don't you?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think it's wonderful to actually see a new interpretation of a pattern that was used. Is wonderful. Yeah, that's fantastic. That interests me because I've seen it. That's actually, I think it was in a private auction. I think it was a panel, wasn't it? That I think the original was wasn't it like a buff coloured
Yes.
thread on brown, wasn't it?
And
Yeah.
it was incomplete.
Incomplete. That's right. So we're not sure what the panel was used for.
No,
whether
no.
it was a panel on a cloak or whether it was a banner,
Or a
who
big
knows?
tableau.
Or even part of a huge garment.
Yeah.
We're not sure, but I think it's one. The way you've caught the cupids hunting and the leopards and lions sort of rearing. That's wonderful detail.
We tend to have used that for schlamis,
Yeah.
the plural term for it. But that has been the tableon that has gone on the huge schlamis shape.
And it works. It really does look good. It's
You could be biased because you have one, but it does
I
look
have
good.
one, yeah,
They
and
do
it's-
look good. I think other customers have been quite happy with their
There's-
own versions.
I'm sure there's a quote from Churchill wasn't it about Arthur and I always apply this to various historical projects. Now, even if it didn't exist, it damn well should have done. And I know it's a bit of a cheat and a bit of a fudge, but it's one of these things that kind of works, and I love it, absolutely love it.
Dan, I'm going to ask you about your tunic because it's been a long time for me to create it.
I absolutely love it.
But this is more of a bespoke, literally to you, because you were given the panel, weren't you?
Yeah, I actually do possess the original. I haven't got it with me today, but I do possess the original version of this panel, and it's in a block of perspex. And I often take it to school, so I wanted something that was a copy of that. And what I like is you've taken you've obviously taken other examples, because all I have is that, but you've actually taken other examples which basically are of the time, and I think it for me it works as a tunic, and it's got this wonderful addition which a lot of Coptic tunics are supposed to have, which is a split under the arm.
Yes.
Which you can basically, on hot days, you can walk around that. So very often, I imagine people in Britain probably didn't employ this very much.
I would say.
But,
Definitely a Mediterranean trait, I
it
think.
is a Mediterranean thing. So yeah, on a hot day,
You can try it around
There
you.
are images that you can see with people having these tucked
Tied
into
up.
the back of their collar.
yeah.
Yep.
So so these like splits under the arm it's not an accident. It's actually
No.
based on an example. Now, obviously, there are some arguments about whether they had Coptic tunics in Britain and other parts of North Europe. Well, I think there's enough iconography to support the use, but obviously the thing about Britain and textiles is, unfortunately, we are short on ancient textiles in Britain because our climate
Doesn't
ruins
allow.
everything, and you only have to leave something in your garden for a summer to realise it's ruined, and that's today. So yeah, I mean the thing about textiles in Britain, the climate does destroy an awful lot. So we don't, there are not really a lot of examples in Britain at all, really.
Not really much to go on.
No.
But, as I say, the examples that we're using to create these designs are extant pieces that have been excavated in Egypt.
Sure. Now, which era is that one there? That interests me. It's like a.
So again, we have the original, small original piece of this design here.
Yeah.
It looks to us very similar to like an amphora.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Right, yeah.
so we're looking at that Hellenistic original influence.
Yeah.
It's early period.
Yeah.
The actual textile, so somewhere between the mid 3rd century to the mid 5th century.
Yeah.
Although there has been some efforts to radiocarbon date
Yeah.
extant samples, especially within the last 5 to 10 years, it's still difficult to put exact dates on a lot of them. But I would say that design is probably safely to say it's 4th century.
Yeah.
You know, sitting in that middle period.
Now, I have heard gossip. There have been a few. I don't think everyone can quite agree on the colours of the tunics yet, can they? Because I think there was wasn't there something on the forum recently? Someone was discussing that I think you were saying earlier.
So different colours,
different units.
Different colours possibly for different units, especially in the military context. I think it's fairly much agreed now that the majority of these very heavily designed tunics, you know, there was a lot of work that went into the weaving to create these fabrics, and it's unlikely that you would have had something like this and then hidden it under armour.
Under armour, exactly.
So these are sort of tunics that people would have worn on for their Sunday best. You know, for on best occasions.
Absolutely.
And more than likely in a plain white linen. Or a natural linen like the one you're wearing. It's normally accepted these days that under late Roman armour we were probably looking at a red linen. And you know, if you could afford it, maybe you would have had a few embellishments on the part of the tunic that might have been seen. But again, you know, it's unlikely that you would have gone to the expense of obtaining a material that would have been woven. It would have taken a very long time, and it would have been, you know, labour intensive. It would have been an expensive piece of material. Are you then going to go and just throw it underneath armour and not see it?
Yeah, and it's also worth saying that the school of thought now is that under armour you'd have a padding. You'd have a padded layer. You wouldn't just wear oily armour over the top of your Sunday best. It just wouldn't happen. So I understand.
And with regard to samples, I mean, the camera lady's going to intervene. My samples I've got tend to be natural, raw. Because I've been trying to get sort of fabric. Obviously they've been over time.
Over time they darken.
They're darkening, but I still think they should be raw. So the colour you've actually got on yours, Dan, which is a linen, a very raw colour.
Linen,
We're saying about that's probably a lot nearer to this than maybe sort of Ian's, slightly more, it's white. It's more white or off-white, but I still think it would have been natural.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the majority would have been.
And the majority
the bright white might have been, you know, very few, but people may have asked for a particularly white linen if they were looking for something that was really going to stand out and be special.
And also, is it wool or linen that's harder to dye? I always get confused by that. I know I'm probably going to get shouted at for saying that, but I understand that. Is it wool that's harder to dye than linen? Or
no, the other way round, as far as I understand it. So the linen itself, it tends to not take colour very, very well. Wool tends to take colour a lot easier. And the majority of the original examples, they are a base linen with a wool woven in.
People might have dyed their own colours though, Ian. I think you need to sort of...
I've
not done dyeing, so on behalf of Coptic MEO, I don't really know the answers to that one.
But these are questions you often get asked by people.
But I do know that in the samples that I've got there, the majority is woven in with a dyed wool that's of an indigo shade.
Absolutely, but you're absolutely right. You can actually see that. I mean, obviously over time it's gone like this sort of tea colour, but the original would have been a lot paler.
Yeah, it'd have been a natural shade with the dyed wool in analysis. And there has also been embroidery on there as well. You've had embroidery where there's bits that have gone probably slightly wrong on the loom, and they've thought, well, I would stitch that bit in, because I've found that when making these on the embroidery machines, there's always a bit that won't line up, so I machine it in by hand.
I have to. The reason I absolutely love this. This is wonderful. I love the colours on this. I love the
I've called it Bacchus. It is a mishmash of different designs.
Yeah, but it's lovely though. I absolutely love it.
That is only 5th century.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of completely Romanised Bacchus drinking that's get plastered. I've got loads of money to get plastered, so
there are. Is it
in a tunic?
I think it's not. I think that there are floors that actually have people hunting, but they have different coloured tunics. Where is that? Is it the Villa Borghese or something in Rome? There's a fantastic fort.
The hunting mosaics.
Hunting mosaic. Yeah, and you see different people in different colours there, and it's just extraordinary to see that.
Yeah.
But no, it's absolutely lovely. And the other thing about Coptic Enemy as well as the tunics, they produce a fantastic range of belts from the Roman period right way up to the 13th and 14th century. And one of my favourites is that one hanging up over there, and it's beautiful. Look at that. Can you talk us through that, mate? That's
yeah. So the fittings on this belt. This is
navigate this camera.
the fittings on this belt are cast by George at Danegeld.
Oh yes, splendid.
Okay.
This is George Easton.
That's right. Yeah. And they are basically found from a grave called the Chemethan Warrior grave. Yeah. And they believe that it went into the ground in the early part of the 5th century.
Right.
However, some scholars have said that they believe some parts of the belt may have been quite old, and then other bits were added to it. So it could be that the belt itself started life, in the late 3rd, early 4th century,
and bits were taken
and then
off
bits
it,
were actually added to it. And
Yeah.
it was put together.
Or perhaps a belt that was rotted or damaged, and then
Possibly.
things because you often get that with these tunics. There are loads of examples of Coptic tunics where panels are literally ripped off and sewn onto later tunics, which is extraordinary to see.
Yep, because I'm sure if you had a tunic and it wore itself out, you would save whatever you could, harvest it, and then applique it onto another plain garment.
And
There are examples of appliqued tunics.
Of course.
And I saw one in the V&A some years ago, and it looked so badly stitched. I thought I could have done that. it was this panel, and it was just the stitching was all over the place. But they were obviously trying to harvest something from an earlier tunic.
In fact, this one, the later one that I'm doing, the one that's about to be revealed soon to the client, to the customer, I apologise, but that is actually, in the original, it is over half-length clavy, right down to almost the sort of top of thigh, and it's actually, it's appliqued.
Wow.
And you can see the stitching on the edge, and it's actually double layer of applique. You've got a bit at the neck, then you've got these 2 big panels with little roundels at the bottom.
Fantastic.
But he'll have that soon, but that's to show
that's
the breadth of what we do.
And so I think with some of the designs, you try to put yourself into the mindset of the person that was weaving them.
Yeah.
And obviously we're recreating this with an embroidery technique, a modern embroidery technique. But to weave an entire garment on a loom in a single piece of fabric must be extraordinarily difficult compared to just weaving a small panel that you can then applique onto a tunic. So,
well, because am I right in thinking that these are actually the whole tunic was stretched out flat and woven on a loom with these integral?
Absolutely.
So the loom must have been colossal.
Yeah, the loom, probably would have taken up half your house. And,
because you're talking about literally unpicking the seams and
yes,
flattening the whole thing
flat,
out
and
on
weaving
one
the whole
gigantic
thing,
loom.
yeah.
That's just extraordinary. And to actually get the pattern so consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, the skills behind that are incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at some of the abiculi and segmentae that are on these tunics. Sometimes you'll see that it's the same pattern, but there's a slight variation from left and right. And there was conjecture that you'd have more than one person working on a particular fabric.
Oh, really?
So where 2 people were working on it, they were trying to copy each other,
Yeah.
but they were actually getting slightly different shapes of heads and things where 2 different people have actually created the same garment.
In fact, to prove that, one on yours, Dan, your abiculi with your sort of square forms, there is a couple of different versions of this.
Wow.
And I found them and I thought, oh, that's interesting. They're just changed ever so slightly. So whether it's a different place that's done it, whether it's just a different take on it.
Fantastic.
I think you would have. I think you would have quite often found that if a particular design had become popular, you would have other weaving houses, other villages, other areas going. If that's popular, we're going to try and make that one ourselves.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, it's absolutely extraordinary to see all the stuff you do. And if you get a chance to see Coptic ME, they trade at Torm every year, and they have a range of fantastic garments, leather work as well, and other accessories.
Okey-doke. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Dan, but you're with us at Torm anyway.
I'm
and
indeed. Yeah, very happy
thanks,
to do it.
Ian. Hubby, tolerate me all the time. Well done. Thank you. Cheers.